Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome to the show, Plant-Centered listener. I am so thankful you are here today. I have a special guest with me today. So if you are a walker, a runner, if you bike, if you are in the gym, if you do any sort of movement, and I mean, if you're just like out walking your dogs, this podcast is for you. I found this conversation with Sun Sachs, who is the co-founder of Rewire Fitness, absolutely fascinating when it comes to your mental fitness. It has a lot of application to you and what you're doing. We talk about sleep, we talk about nutrition, and we talk about breath work. So many things. I'm not going to give them all away because it was a pretty cool conversation. So Sun is a 20-year veteran in software development and a lifelong endurance athlete for the past over 35 years in competitive cycling, triathlons, and adventure races. Sun is passionate about animal welfare, the environment, and human health, and he co-founded the plant-based media brand www.thebeat.com, which may sound familiar to you, which ended up later merging with Forks Over Knives, the leading plant-based health resource. Sun is also a plant-based culinary chef graduate and former instructor from Matthew Kenny Cuisine. Sun continues to advise for The Beat and promotes a healthy plant-based athletic lifestyle with his wife, 2 kids, and 7 animal rescues, 4 cats, and 3 dogs. Sun gives us insight into his own plant-based backstory, and he also talks about what mental fitness actually is and why it's important and how the traditional way of building mental resilience, it's like, I don't really feel like going to the gym. We'll just do it, get it done, push through it, all those things, how that system is flawed. So there's a lot of great nuggets of information for you to take away from this for people of all different athletic capabilities. So I'm very excited for you to listen to this episode. Please join me in welcoming Sun to the show. Well, Sun, welcome to the show. I'm very excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, so great to be chatting with you, Ashley, and looking forward to digging into the conversation and see where things go.
Yes. So let's start with your own vegan backstory. I'm curious how that came about for you.
Yeah, I have several sequels to the story, so it's a pretty interesting one. Hopefully, folks can learn from it, relate to it, understand that taking a perfectionist approach isn't always the best way. My original experience with plant-based eating or veganism started when I was 16. And really became aware of animal agriculture and all of the negative impacts of the environment. So it's very much an ethical choice. At the time, I was working my way up to be an elite cyclist, bike racer. I went all in. Next day, I was vegan, and kind of how my mindset typically operates. There wasn't really a notion, like dating myself, but there wasn't really a notion in the late 80s that plant-based eating was necessarily healthy. So
Yep.
that wasn't even in my sort of criteria. It's like, I'm doing this regardless of if it's healthy or not. Obviously, I don't want to be unhealthy, but so I went all in and went pretty well for about 4 or 5 years. The problem is, as I started to increase my training, I basically got to a point where I was working out 40 to 50 hours per week. Um,
Wow.
yeah, that type of regiment, you're burning an incredible amount of calories. So I was burning probably between 8 and 10,000 calories a day. Meanwhile, I was probably eating about 2,500. So you can imagine what happened.
Yes.
I actually got down to between 0 and 2% body fat.
Oh
Um,
my
I
gosh.
remember, yeah, it was pretty scary. I remember going into the doctor and they're like, "There's something wrong with the machine. It keeps saying zero."
Wow.
Obviously, like it's probably unlikely that it was zero, but that machine had an accuracy of a range of 2%. So I was incredibly malnourished, and
Yeah.
it wasn't a factor, as I realized later about plant-based eating. It was simply not enough calories, and obviously in general, plant-based foods don't always have the same amount of calories as if you're just eating like lots of meats and dairy. So I ended up getting very sick. I was 50 pounds lighter than I am today. and
Wow.
was brutal. I was sick all the time. Lots of health impacts, but basically I got to the point where I thought I was really going to compromise my life, and
Mm,
I basically gave up plant-based eating,
yeah.
which was heartbreaking because I was doing it for ethical reasons. Then fast forward, I kind of went to the other extreme, ate a bunch of meat and dairy for a good decade, and found myself overweight and unhealthy. um, so this was around 2010, and really kind of came to understand the healthy benefits of plant-based eating, and knew I needed a change. So I started off with like an incremental, just one meal a day. I started feeling better and better. Second meal, and by the time I got to the third meal, it was maybe 7 months later. I felt so good. I was like, of course, I'm going to go all in.
Yeah.
And from there, I never looked back. It's about 11, 12 years now, and been vegan, plant based ever since, and feel incredibly healthy. Probably the healthiest I've ever been. And yeah, plan on keep going.
Yes, yes. I think that's wonderful. I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to keep them short because I definitely want to get into the rest of the
Yeah.
podcast. But obviously, for people who are listening, they can't see your bicycle in the background, which I'm assuming is yours. So, was that a big part of your training way back when you were doing, 50 hours of training a week?
Yeah, it was pretty much solely on the bike. So
Okay.
yeah, I was competing in a lot of different off-road. Originally, it was road racing, then in mountain bike racing
Okay.
across several different disciplines. I did
Yeah.
actually get to the point where I got to an elite level. Unfortunately, that sort of combination of really overtraining and having what now people call a fixed mindset was really not a good recipe for longevity in my career. So I ended up
Mm,
retiring early at 26,
okay.
and went into product and software engineering after that. So
Wonderful. Which we're going to talk about, which I'm excited for. Do you feel
yeah.
like, so kind of going back to your story when you were working out a lot on the bike a lot, do you feel like you were overtraining to compensate maybe for under eating, just maybe not understanding how the two go hand in hand? Or is that a normal part of training maybe for the elite level?
Yeah, I mean there is certainly, I mean with with cycling where your strength to weight ratio is very important. There are a lot of like eating disorders and things like that, men and women within cycling, because you're basically trying to see how light you can get while also maintaining your strength. Now, I
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily doing that. I was really just focused on more is better. And if I just
Mhm.
keep training, I'm going to get stronger. And it may be difficult, but I had a lot of willpower, so I'm just going to keep going,
Yeah.
keep
Yep.
grinding, and eventually that catches up with you.
Yeah.
It has diminishing returns, and pretty soon you start to break down, and then you're in trouble. It's hard to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like you learned a good amount, like that break that you took between being vegan and then going back to eating meat and dairy and then kind of going back again to being vegan? Was there a period of time where you felt like, okay, I have more confidence going to this, or I understand it much better, more differently than maybe when I was younger?
So, again, I kind of have this sort of all-in mindset. So what I did once I started going plant-based a few years in, I took professional culinary training with Matthew Kenny. I ended up doing really well in the program and was offered a job teaching sports nutrition. So this is under Brendan Brazer's kind of program. So taught that for a while. Learned, basically learned all the fine and basic culinary techniques. Learned a lot about nutrition. Eventually, that led into the founding of a website called The Beat. It's a very accessible website for plant-based eating. So in the process, absolutely, I learned a lot more about healthy eating, and also about just taking an approach that's a little more sustainable,
Mm,
which the all or nothing, the perfectionist sort of mindset can actually be very damaging. Like it's a strength and a weakness, in my opinion. So
yeah.
you very, very much have to sort of keep that in balance.
It's a very fine line to walk. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I know, son, you're very passionate also about not just like nutrition and physical fitness, but also mental fitness. And so I'm curious if you could kind of explain to myself and the listener what exactly is mental fitness and why is it so important, especially when you're an athlete?
So, from an athlete's perspective, we think about training the body and pushing the body to the point where there's an adaptation and then giving it time to recover. So, training and recovery is super important. The same thing is actually important for the mind. So, we often overlook that part. We think that there's going to be a sort of a positive side effect of just pushing ourselves physically really hard, but we're not thinking about cognitive recovery or cognitive resilience in the way that we sort of like mental weights for your mind. So, what our solution is very like mental fitness is from our perspective is a holistic approach where you think about building more mental resilience, but also creating a space and creating tools for cognitive recovery, emotional recovery, all of the aspects that ultimately impact your performance. When we talk to an athlete at any level, professional, junior, amateur, whatever it is, we'll ask them what percentage of their performance is mental, and they'll always say above 50%. But
Mm.
then when we ask them, okay, if it really is that important, how much time do you train on it? There's often like this awkward silence, or they'll literally say zero.
Uh-huh.
Right. And it kind of makes sense because there's not really a structured way to train your mind, or at least one that's self-evident. So that's the part that we're trying to sort of fill that gap for.
Yeah. I know you think about all the time and energy we put into training our physical bodies, our physical self. And you're right. I was thinking, yeah, mental health or mental fitness is really important. But even in my own reflection, I'm like, the amount of time I spend on it is probably pretty small in comparison to the amount of time I'm spending at the gym. And I'm sure that's the true for a lot of the athletes that you work with.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. And that cognitive fatigue can build up over time. The constant stress that we're under in our modern society, and that has consequences.
Mm,
If you start to get more irritable, more frustrated, more emotional, oftentimes that's the reason. It's your
yeah.
your brain is just really tired. When does it ever get a rest? When does it ever get support?
Right. Yeah,
you know?
true. Yes. Especially in the
Yeah.
day and age we live in, and there's just constant communication all around us, and it's hard to kind of tune out some of that noise and focus on our own mental fitness.
Yeah.
So, when you're working with athletes, what are some ways that you maybe just some easy attainable steps to help them prioritize their mental fitness? Because we all know, especially at the level of athletes that you're working with, the physical fitness is a high priority. So how do you kind of bump up the mental fitness priority as well?
The first thing is really to establish an awareness of where they're at each day. So what we have is readiness in general is really this idea which you'll see with different wearables like Whoop or Aura or Garmin. What it's doing is basically looking at your physical state, your sleep, your training, your heart rate, and it's trying to give you guidance on how ready you are to achieve your goals that day or to continue training or rest. What we do is we take that information as part of a morning practice. So you wake up in the morning, half hour within waking up, you open up the app. If you do track that kind of stuff, we'll bring it all in. And then we give you a cognitive assessment and an emotional assessment. And then based on that, we reflect back where you're at. So, like I said, you may not always know where you're at cognitively or emotionally. And we'll show you, hey, compared to what you normally are at, you're at a high level of stress. You're at a high level of cognitive fatigue. So that's the first part is just having them understand where they're at. And then the second part is providing a solution for it. So we're very sensitive to the time crunched person, whether it be a professional or amateur or just somebody who's just has a lot of goals and a lot of things they're doing in their life, a lot of responsibilities. So what our interventions do is they give you like a 2 to 4 minute intervention that'll help you make the best of your day despite that situation,
Huh.
despite the poor lack of sleep or whatever the problem is.
Yeah, yeah. So they're able to you kind of give them a very sounds like very achievable task for them to do in a short period of time, especially for someone who maybe is really busy and can't afford to spend 2 hours on their mental fitness like maybe they do in their physical fitness to help them again increase their physical fitness? Because I'm guessing it goes hand in hand, the mental fitness and the physical fitness.
The two are very related. So what the science has shown is like when you're under a greater amount of cognitive fatigue, your perception of effort feels much harder, and then that
Mm,
limits your physical performance. So a little experiment, like a little thought experiment, if we all think about this. If you've ever had a day where you work really hard or you have a lot of stress and you're supposed to work out in the evening, one, it's going to be very hard to motivate to get out there, go to the gym, go for the run, whatever it is. But two, it'll actually feel more difficult. And that's because your brain is under cognitive strain and it's actually misperceiving or amplifying the physical effort. Because, of course, the two are interrelated. It does take, cognitive focus to go through a workout. And if your brain is fatigued, it's going to basically send signals that your body is having a harder time, and thus you're not going to achieve your goal, or it's just going to feel very difficult.
hmm. I feel like the traditional sense would be like, well, go to the gym anyway, push hard, push through it. Why is that maybe not so helpful in building mental resilience? Or why is that maybe the traditional way that we approached it a bit flawed in your opinion, or from what you've seen
Yeah,
based on your expertise?
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I've had firsthand experience with it, and then also from working with many different athletes and scientists. Like, basically, this idea that you build mental resilience as a side effect of physical training is very flawed because one, what we call the minimum effective dose, varies over time. So let's just say you're training 4 days a week and you're going for runs and you're going to the gym. You're going to have to keep pushing yourself harder and harder to get to that very acute state where you're going to get some kind of resilience out of it. And in the meantime, you're going to keep adding more cognitive load, which is going to keep reducing your ability to perform. And so it becomes a vicious cycle where you're literally just digging a hole and not allowing your brain to recover. Like most people these days don't say, well, I'm just going to run every single day regardless of how I feel and I'll just get stronger. Like that's been demystified these days. And the same thing is with your brain. Like if you just keep pushing yourself over and over and over again, pretty soon you're actually going to break down. You're going to have low energy. It's going to be hard to motivate, and your physical performance is going to go down. So there's a better way. There's a more targeted way to really just focus on that mental resilience the same way you would with physical training.
Okay. What are some of those ways, if you don't mind sharing, like some better ways to maybe shift that focus to this old style of thinking where you just kind of push through, keep going, do it every day, no matter how you feel, to just being more
Yeah,
mindful of where you
yeah,
are mentally?
yeah, that's right. So there's two different interventions in our system at a high level. One is around the cognitive recovery and then sort of the sports psychology, and the other part is around the pure kind of resilience training. So on the recovery side, let's say you wake up in the morning and you have a poor night's sleep, and as a result, you're a little more emotional, you're a little more frustrated, and your brain is just simply tired. Um, so what do you do? Well, in our system, we'll basically create what we call a recipe, which will be a combination of different evidence-based approaches. So in one experience that lasts 2 to 4 minutes, you'll go through a specific breathing modality, like you might do box breathing or 4-7-8 breathing, which is going to get your body into a homeostasis, get it into a recovery state. We then pipe in what we call binaural beats, which are basically a device for getting your brain into a calm or a recovery state just by listening to the music.
Hmm.
We'll bring in things like self-talk and visualization. So you have mantras that you repeat that are cues or triggers to being in the right mindset. And while you're looking at the screen, we're also priming you subliminally with positive imagery. So you come out of the experience feeling refreshed, mind and body. And that's a much better place to start, even if you have a goal that day, like you're coming into the gym or out for the run, or even for some important meetings or whatever your responsibilities are, with a calm, ready mindset, which is
Mm,
really the best place to be for performance, as opposed to stressed, distracted, full of anxiety. Like that's not going to help you.
yeah.
So that's a really important part of what we do. And we find people will come to the app multiple times for, to help them with pre-workout, get into a prime state for a workout, help with stress, help with a good night's sleep. There's a lot of different tools within the system for that kind of stuff. So that's the first piece.
I mean, you mentioned different things that you can utilize to really tap into refining that mental fitness. And one of them, you included breath work, which I feel like we're learning more and more about of how powerful our breath can be in our mental and emotional mindset, I guess would be the right word. And I think that's really helpful. And not just that, but like you said, the music, even the images. I think so many times when we're like, oh, I need a mental break from something, maybe we just pick up our phone and scroll through social media. But I feel like very few people walk away from that being like, oh, I feel so much better. I'm more relaxed. I'm in a calm state. It's usually the opposite. So I
Mm-hmm.
just find that
Yeah.
very refreshing to hear that it's very targeted tools to really help improve your mental fitness.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's really important. Just spending, like I said, 2 to 4 minutes can make a big difference. Like we see the average person coming out of one of those sessions having a 70% reduction in stress, which
Wow.
is a massive change.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
giving yourself that, like, even if you don't use the app, look up box breathing, look up 478 breathing, look up pranayama breathing. You do that for 5 minutes, you're going to feel materially better.
Wow.
Now, of course, when we layer on more protocols, it amplifies the effects. But just doing that, just giving yourself a little bit of time each day, you hit the reset button.
Yep. Yeah. Does anyone ever say, "Oh, it's just 2 to 4 minutes. How impactful can it be?"
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, I mean, this is what the data shows. There was actually a study that came out in the publication Cell this month, in January. They
Yeah.
basically took these same breathing protocols and they had the subjects do it for 5 minutes, and they compared that with meditation, and they actually found that the breathing modality had a greater impact in stress reduction and on-the-spot improvement in their mental state than meditation. So
Wow.
it's an incredibly powerful tool, and it doesn't
Yeah.
take a lot of time. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's refreshing too. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. It's like it's only 2 to 4 minutes like this, and it can improve my mental fitness by 70% or something like that. Like that's huge versus looking at, oh, well, it's only 2 to 4 minutes. How much could it really impact me? But it sounds like it's
yeah.
definitely the first part. Like it can have a massive impact on even just how you perform physically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have sessions that help you get into a physically primed state. There's breathing styles that will get you into, what is known as a sympathetic state, which is basically, it's generally known as fight or flight, but it also helps you with performance. So, like, if let's say you have a presentation, your body's actually shifting into a sympathetic state because it knows you're going to need a little boost of energy. You're going to need to be ready for something that's going to be difficult. So you can, with breathing alone, you can literally shift your body from one state to another. So it's shockingly powerful, and
Yeah.
something that uh, these little improvements you can do that are very accessible. You start to do them every day, and man, you feel transformed. If you can
Mhm.
just get into a habit of just giving yourself a little bit of time to hit the reset button, get your body into a calm state, man, it helps.
Yeah. It sounds similar to when someone goes plant-based, and they just wanna tell everyone, like, "Just try it, you'll feel so much better," and I feel like that's the same with this, like, just give it a try. It's only a few minutes of your day, and just see what can happen if you do it time and time again, and it sounds like it'll add up to some pretty big changes.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
those little steps that the compounding effects are very significant. We don't,
Yes.
as humans, we're not so great actually generally about seeing the compounding effects of things. So it's always good to be reminded of that. And if you feel better each time, it's sort of self-motivating and self-perpetuating.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So you mentioned that was sort of like the first layer. Was there, like, another step to this?
Hmm. Yeah. The other step is really the neurotraining. So the idea is, again, similar, like mental weights, if you will. So what our system does is it uses a specific type of cognitive task that's been shown in many studies to basically build an adaptation to more mental resilience. So what it's called is an impulse control test. And basically, you're answering these little questions, 10 to 15 minutes in a session. So not a terrible amount of time. But what it does is it basically overloads your brain and then creates this adaptation. And it's actually targeted toward this specific impulse control. For the fellow nerds out there, it's the part of your prefrontal cortex known as the anterior cingulate cortex, and it's responsible for will-driven behavior as well as your perception of effort. So if you just imagine, like, if you could improve those two things, your willpower and how you perceive difficulty, and you could improve those things, it really does translate to more grit, more perseverance, for not just athletic performance, but really anything you need to overcome in terms
Mhm.
of mind body challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you have the first layer, and this is the second layer of kind of going through the series of questions. And then is there anything from there that you typically recommend or have them do?
Making sure they're doing enough cognitive recovery and enough neurotraining, sort of balancing those two things is very important. Again, it kind of starts with this morning practice where we reflect back where you're at and then recommend one or the other. But within that, there's a lot of variations. So for the neurotraining piece, we're actually just rolling out this new hardware component, which will allow you to do the brain training questions while you're going for a walk, while you're going for a run.
Oh,
Have like a mind body workout, which is a
yeah.
pretty amazing experience, because you're actually you feel like you're working both parts of yourself, and it can be very satisfying, but also it helps with the monotony of training. Sometimes it can be
Mm,
pretty boring,
yeah.
especially in the winter months, for those here in the
Yes.
cold weather regions. So having something like that is a pretty cool feature just for fun, but generally speaking, it's a way to do those two things at the same time, mind and body training.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, son, too, you're also really passionate about burnout because obviously you shared your own experience with that. I was curious if
Mm-hmm.
you could touch on maybe just some tools. And I know that you've mentioned several already just with the app, but some tools that you recommend to help athletes prevent burnout, because I know that can happen pretty quickly, especially when you're training really hard, like I know some of your athletes did and like you yourself did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, the when we look at burnout and what factors are contributing to burnout, the, the biggest ones, number one of all of them, all of the factors, is having a perfectionist mindset.
Mm,
So oftentimes a perfectionist mindset is also what we call a fixed mindset. So it believes, it's a mentality where you're having to sort of revalidate or reprove your worth based on your performance outcomes. So in other words, like, I better get a PR in my run every week, or I'm not good. If I suddenly had a bad day, that's actually a terrible thing. Failure is not an option.
mm,
Um, versus a growth mindset where you're embracing failure as a learning opportunity, and you're not judging yourself based on every single physical performance you do or whatever other goal you have. So just trying to shift into more of a growth centered mindset is massive for preventing burnout, and just more a healthy way. I always say that I'm a recovering perfectionist, so
yes.
it's in my nature to have that mindset. So I always work on it. Um, the other thing is having sort of a one-dimensional perception of yourself. So if you think like, I'm an athlete, I'm a vegan, and anything comes in the way of disrupting that, you again, you have like a poor performance, maybe you get injured, something happens where you can't represent that one dimension of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
um, it can be very crushing.
Yeah.
And it also can lead to things like overtraining, because of course your whole self-worth is built around this image you've created for yourself. So really important to have other things in your life that you support and um, and grow as well as whatever your main sort of goal is or what you feel like is your purpose. Like it's really important to have a little bit of balance there.
Mm, yeah.
So a lot of it is sort of on the psychological state. And if you're training, I mean, I think of course, the balancing your mind body recovery is super important.
Hmm.
Um, More is not more. Like eventually your body will break down. So,
Yeah.
we often forget, but you actually get stronger when you're resting. You don't get stronger during training. You only get stronger like when you're having a good night's sleep. That's when your body is resting and recovering and building more muscle or more capability. So like treating that of equal importance, if not more. Like if I
Hmm.
like on a daily basis, if I have a choice, get a longer night's sleep or compromise my sleep because I got to get up to train, I'll take the longer night's sleep every time.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just long term, it's a much better outcome.
I think that's the key too, is long term, it's a much better outcome because so often we're so focused on just the next day, we don't realize that that could potentially be detrimental to our training or just not that really productive, or it might make us feel worse coming away from that period of training as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then that starts to snowball and now you're way worse
Mhm.
off than if you just took that day off.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a former CrossFit athlete, I guess, games athlete. His name is Matt Frazier, and I remember him saying this was many years ago that he tried to get 10 hours of sleep a night just because it helped his performance so much, it helped his recovery so much. I remember hearing that going, wow, you just never think that when you're sleeping, that is also a big part of your recovery and a big part of your performance. They go hand in hand.
Big time. And having a good, not just the number of hours, but the quality of sleep, obviously. Like if
Yes.
you're on your screen till late at night, if you have a lot of stress, if your bedtime varies a lot, all these things are going to negatively impact the quality of your sleep, which is so important.
Yes. Yeah.
So important, especially as you get older, that the quality of your sleep generally, you sleep shorter and your deep sleep and your REM sleep also reduces. So you really want to make sure that you're
Mm,
doing everything you can to maximize, the, the benefits of the sleep you're trying to get. So
yeah. Yeah. And speaking of maximizing performance, I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to touch on in regards to, what we can do as athletes to maximize our training, to maximize our longevity, our performance, a longevity really in the sport that we're a part of. If there's anything else that you wanted to add to that,
yeah, thank you. I have a few principles that are worth probably sharing.
let's hear them.
um, hey, we haven't talked too much about nutrition, but number one in my list is eat and drink foods that support your immune system.
Mm,
The most profound thing I've ever heard someone say around health and nutrition is your body's default state is health.
mm,
So it's always trying to return to health, always.
wow.
It'd be like if your car always tried to fix itself.
Yes.
But what happens if, let's say, you're allergic to dairy products, but you're drinking milk every day? Well, you're actually bringing down your immune system every single day. And again, that compounding effect on your immune system is significant. It doesn't seem like much, but you're creating inflammation every single day, for example.
Mm, yeah.
So if you're not feeling healthy, uh, looking at your nutrition and seeing what are the things that could possibly be, you know, bringing it down. A lot of times we'll know, like we have a bad eating habit or whatever it is. But so I'm always looking at anti-inflammatory foods. I'm looking at all kinds of foods that are going to boost my immune system with antioxidants, high fiber foods, all kinds of things. That's super important. And I found for myself, like other than getting COVID once, I'm never sick.
Yeah.
And I'm knock on wood, of course, but having that strong immune system, a lot of everything else will sort of like your overall health will take care of itself if you can really think that way.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
that's a big one.
Hmm.
The other one is having some kind of mindfulness or practice. Um,
Mm.
Now, it could be breath work, it could be meditation. I think gratitude's also important.
Yeah.
Like, you know, um, there's something powerful about just looking at the big picture. Um, so that's important. I would also say
Hmm.
like just daily exercise, walking. I walk every day with our dogs, which
Yep.
is a great habit, and it's incredibly helpful for your peace of mind, for your body. It's such low impact. You could, you know, you can walk in addition to training or doing other things that you do.
Hmm.
Um, and then I would say, you know, having positive relationships, that's super important,
Yeah. Yep.
right? We're
Absolutely.
social animals. I mean, that's,
Hmm.
if you look at a lot of the societal unrest and a lot of the challenges, it's from this kind of individualism sort of approach and feeling separate and not feeling supported and feeling frustrated and feeling alone. Like
Yeah.
you continue to foster those long-term relationships. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then my last one is just continuous improvement on all of the above. So
Nice.
just keep trying to improve.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Which, I mean,
yeah,
if we, like you said, if you kind of zoom out and look at your life, like these are things that over time, that compounding effect that you talked about, if you can just kind of inch the needle forward every single day when it comes to maybe building community or, creating great habits around the way that you're eating, that can have a great lasting positive impact on your life over time.
yeah. It's pretty profound. Like
Yeah.
it all adds up, and pretty soon you have this, you know, massive base of health, this
Yeah.
great support network. You feel physically capable of doing just about anything. Like, you know, you're not building up and ignoring all the stress. You're actually dealing with it every day. Like all those things.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, son, I am curious, and you touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but how you went from being an athlete, working under Matthew McKinney, and then, going down this basically this journey of creating this mental fitness platform. How did that, maybe just briefly, how did that start for you? And then how can we learn about this mental fitness platform and how it could potentially fit into our own lives?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah, the origin story. So I would still consider myself an athlete. I still train every day, and more focused on just sort of the love of what I do and enjoying the process. Don't compete too much anymore. But basically, I was on the bike trainer one day, and I had this epiphany about this science that I had heard about for years that never came to market. And it was very frustrating because, well, the second I heard it, it was the kind of resilience training. Second I heard it, I knew it was a big deal. But in the lab, what they basically did is they took a keyboard and taped it to a treadmill. And so the subjects would sort of like answer brain training questions while running on a treadmill.
Hmm.
Not really the way that it would work in the real world, but of course, great for the clinical findings. So my epiphany was like, hey, we could take all of these scientific methods that are just stuck in the lab, like subliminal priming and you know, binaural beats, and this sort of insight into the cognitive state of athletes and how it can help, and bring it all together in something that's as easy as opening up an app and pushing a button. And so that was 2018. So we're pretty far along now in the process, but we basically, once I had the idea, we built a prototype in like 2 weeks,
Wow.
had some more co-founders join, and the rest is history, so to speak. But yeah, it just came from like just an initial insight. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like it came together. I mean, the 2-week period, especially that's quick.
Yeah, and that the only reason is because I had built a career in product and software development. So it's sort of like without even realizing, I was building the skills to solve the problem. And then one
Wow.
day I recognized that and actually knew what the problem was. And
Yeah.
it was, we spent a lot of time building it, beyond that point, a lot of time testing and validating it. But that initial idea was pretty easy to sort of put together and confirm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So if our listeners are curious to access it or learn more about the app and what you do, where is the best place for them to do that or to go looking for information?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to rewirefitness.app, and or look for us in the app stores. We do have a free program, like permanently free. So if you want to jump in and do some of the mindset work and some of the neuro training, check it out. And we also have a podcast, same thing, Rewire Fitness, and we're on all socials. So look forward to hearing from you guys.
Wonderful. And we'll include as many links as possible in the show notes. So it's very easy for you to just go click below and check out Sun and everything that he's doing with Rewire Fitness. Is there anything else, Sun, before I close up shop that you wanted to make sure that we touched on?
No, I would just say for our listeners, just never underestimate the act of just starting little positive, healthy habits.
Mm, yep.
Try out some breath work. Of course, keep going down the plant-based path. That's going to open up a lot of doors and create a lot of health and wellness.
Yes. Yeah. And then add that mental component to it and you'll be unstoppable.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sun, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your area of expertise with me and the listener. Really appreciate everything that you had to share today.
Truly a pleasure. Thanks, Ashley.
Until next time, keep thriving.